The woman's hand hung in the air between them, manicured fingers catching the amber glow of the bar's Edison bulbs. Beckett Morrison had served in 1,500 drinks in this exact spot over 7 years of graveyard shifts, and not once had anyone looked at him the way she did now, like he was something more than the guy who poured bourbon and pretended to care about strangers' problems. Her voice carried the particular authority of someone unaccustomed to refusal. "Dinner, tomorrow night, anywhere you choose." The clock above the liquor shelf read 2:47. Rain hammered the windows of the Lighthouse Bar, turning downtown Portland into a watercolor of neon and regret. 3 customers remained scattered across worn vinyl stools, nursing their demons in silence. Beck wiped down the mahogany counter for the 1,000th time that week, buying seconds to formulate an answer that wouldn't sound as desperate as he felt. "I appreciate the offer, but no." Victoria Sterling's expression shifted through surprise, confusion, and something that might have been respect before settling back into careful neutrality. She lowered her hand, adjusting the collar of a coat that probably cost more than Beck made in 3 months. "You're turning me down." "Looks that way." "May I ask why, Beck arranged clean glasses on the drying rack with movements made automatic by repetition and exhaustion. The truth sat heavy in his chest that he was 34 years old and drowning in medical debt, that his 7-year-old son needed surgery. He couldn't afford that. Dating anyone right now would be cruel because he had nothing to offer except borrowed time and broken promises. But honesty required energy he didn't possess at 3 in the morning. Not looking to date anyone, nothing personal. She studied him with the focus of someone accustomed to reading balance sheets and finding the numbers that didn't add up. "That's unfortunate. I don't ask twice." "Then I guess we're both disappointed." Victoria Sterling gathered her things with the precise efficiency of a woman who'd built an empire before 30. At the door she paused, rain-soaked wind catching her dark hair. "For what it's worth, Mr. Morrison, I think you just made the biggest mistake of your life." Beck turned back to his glasses, already regretting the decision and hating himself for the regret. "Maybe, but it's mine to make." The door closed. Through the window, he watched her disappear into a black sedan that probably had heated seats and a sound system worth more than his truck. She was beautiful, clearly intelligent, and for reasons he couldn't fathom, had walked into a dive bar at 2 in the morning to talk with a bartender about nothing and everything until her offer landed between them like a grenade. The last customer settled his tab and stumbled into the night. Beck locked up, counted the register, and drove home in a Ford Ranger held together by rust and optimism. His apartment complex rose 3 stories of peeling beige paint in a neighborhood where sirens provided the soundtrack, and everyone minded their business because survival meant not caring too hard about other people's struggles. Louise from down the hall met him at the door, her weathered face creased with the particular weariness of a woman who'd raised 4 kids alone and now spent her retirement babysitting for neighbors who couldn't afford anything better. "He's asleep. Had a rough night though, woke up crying around midnight, said his chest hurt." Beck's stomach dropped through the floor. "Did you call?" "Gave him the medicine the doctor prescribed. He settled after 20 minutes. He pressed 3 20s into her palm, despite knowing it was more than he'd budgeted for childcare this week. Louise squeezed his hand, eyes wet with sympathy he didn't want and couldn't reject. "That boy's lucky to have you." Finn slept in the room's only bedroom, small body barely making a dent in the twin mattress Beck had bought at a thrift store 6 months back. His son's face held none of the stress he carried when awake, no worry about the hospital visits or the tests or the way other kids ran without getting tired while he sat on the sidelines catching his breath. At 7 years old, Finn Morrison looked exactly like his mother had at that age, honey-colored hair and defiant chin and eyes that saw too much. Beck settled on the couch that served as his bed, surrounded by evidence of his failure. Medical bills covered the coffee table in neat stacks, organized by how overdue they were. Children's Hospital Portland sent reminders in cheerful blue envelopes that couldn't disguise the fact he owed them $47,000. Credit card statements showed balances that would take decades to clear at minimum payments he could barely manage. The surgery estimate sat on top of everything else like an accusation, $200,000, to repair Finn's ventricular septal defect before it killed him. His phone held 17 missed calls from collection agencies who'd stopped believing his promises. The refrigerator contained milk that would expire tomorrow, and bread he'd bought 2 days past the sell-by date because it was half price. Finn's latest drawing was taped to the wall, a stick figure dad and stick figure son holding hands under a yellow sun that knew nothing about congenital heart defects or fathers who couldn't save their children. Sleep didn't come. Beck lay in darkness listening to his son breathe each inhale and exhale, a reminder of time running out. Morning arrived with pale October light and the smell of instant coffee. Finn appeared in the kitchen doorway wearing pajamas with faded dinosaurs rubbing sleep from his eyes. "Did you work all night again?" "Just until close. How are you feeling?" "Okay, a little tired." The lie sat between them, gentle and terrible. Finn was always tired now, his body slowly betraying him in ways a 7-year-old shouldn't understand but did. They'd learned the signs, the blue tinge to his lips when he overexerted, the way he had to stop halfway upstairs to catch his breath, the exhaustion that followed any activity requiring his damaged heart to work harder than it could manage. Beck made breakfast from the last eggs and bread, stretching groceries that should have run out yesterday. Finn ate without complaint, never asking why they didn't have the sugary cereals other kids brought to school for snack time. He learned early that money was tight, that asking for things meant watching his father's face do complicated gymnastics between wanting to provide and knowing he couldn't. The call came while Finn was getting dressed. Children's Hospital Portland, the number Beck had memorized from seeing it on his phone 3 times a week. Dr. Sarah Hendricks spoke with the careful compassion of someone who delivered bad news professionally. "We got the latest test results. I'm afraid we need to schedule surgery within the next 4 months. The defect is larger than previous scans indicated, and it's not closing on its own." Beck's hand tightened on the phone. "I'm working on the financing." "Mr. Morrison, I understand the financial burden is significant, but without intervention, Finn's prognosis becomes increasingly concerning. The hospital has payment plans, and there are charitable organizations that might be able to help." He'd already contacted every organization on the list she'd given him 6 months ago. Most required income thresholds he made too much to qualify for. The ones that might have helped had waiting lists stretching 2 years. Finn didn't have 2 years. After dropping Finn at school, watching his son trudge toward the building with a backpack that seemed heavier every day, Beck drove to the first of 3 jobs that would consume his waking hours. The Johnsons in the Pearl District had a broken garbage disposal. Mrs. Johnson hovered while he worked, her anxiety manifesting in a running commentary about her daughter's college applications and the kitchen renovation she was planning. The disposal had seized because someone had tried to grind up chicken bones and potato peels simultaneously. Beck cleared the blockage, reset the mechanism, and charged $80 he knew was too little, but couldn't bring himself to increase. Johnson handed over cash and a lecture about maintaining appliances properly. The second job involved replacing rotted deck boards for a rental property in Selwood. The property manager met him with a clipboard and a timeline that would require working through lunch, which suited Beck fine since he'd skipped breakfast to make sure Finn had enough. The boards were cedar expensive even for the replacement grade, and the job was straightforward enough to let his mind wander. He thought about Victoria Sterling, the woman from the bar. Something about her had felt both dangerous and compelling, the loneliness behind her expensive facade, the way she'd listened instead of simply waiting for her turn to speak. She'd mentioned her father's death, her struggles with a board that questioned her leadership, the isolation of success that felt more like imprisonment. For 3 hours, they'd talked like old friends, and then she'd offered dinner, and he'd said no, because accepting anything from anyone felt like admitting defeat. His phone rang at 1:15, Louise's voice tight with controlled panic. "Beck, honey, the school called. Finn collapsed during recess. They took him to the ER." The drive to Legacy Emmanuel Medical Center took 14 minutes that lasted 14 years. Beck abandoned his truck in the emergency loading zone and sprinted through automatic doors that opened too slowly. A nurse directed him to a bay where Finn lay on a gurney, looking impossibly small, oxygen cannula in his nose and fear in his eyes. "Daddy," Beck grabbed his son's hand, forcing steadiness into his voice. "Hey, Bug, heard you had some excitement." "I just got dizzy. Then everything went black." Dr. Hendricks appeared, her expression grave. She pulled Beck aside while a nurse stayed with Finn, speaking in the low tones reserved for delivering news that would change everything. His oxygen saturation dropped to 82%. The defect is causing significant shunting of deoxygenated blood. We stabilized him, but Mr. Morrison, we can't wait 4 months. We need to schedule surgery immediately. How immediately? Within 6 weeks if possible. Longer than that and we're risking permanent damage or cardiac arrest. 6 weeks. 42 days to find $200,000 he didn't have and couldn't borrow. Beck looked at his son through the bay curtain, Finn watching them with the particular awareness of children who've learned to read adult body language for clues about their own survival. I'll figure it out. Hendricks touched his arm, sympathy radiating from her. There are programs. I've contacted all of them. I make too much to qualify and not enough to pay. He drove Finn home in silence, both of them processing different versions of the same fear. At the apartment, Beck set his son up on the couch with cartoons and a blanket, then sat at the kitchen table staring at bills he couldn't pay and a phone he was afraid to answer. His mother had called 3 times. Ellen Morrison lived in a memory care facility in Beaverton, her early onset dementia, stealing pieces of her mind with methodical cruelty. She had good days when she remembered everything, and bad days when she called Beck by his father's name and asked about people who'd been dead for 30 years. The facility cost $3,800 a month, and Beck was 2 months behind. Wyatt Cooper showed up at 6 with pizza and a 6-pack, letting himself in with the key Beck had given him a decade ago when they were young men who thought friendship and determination could overcome anything. Wyatt had 4 kids and a construction job that barely covered rent, but he always found $20 for pizza when Beck needed it most. You look like death. Finn collapsed at school today. They're saying he needs surgery in 6 weeks. Wyatt set down the pizza, his weathered face settling into lines carved by too many years of manual labor and not enough sleep. What do you need, a miracle or 200 grand? Whichever's easier. They ate in silence, the kind of comfortable quiet that came from 20 years of friendship forged in high school football practice and maintained through marriages, deaths, and the slow grind of poverty that crushed dreams without apology. Wyatt had been Beck's best man when he married Grace. He'd been a pallbearer at her funeral 4 years later. He'd held Beck while he cried and then driven him home and put him to bed because sometimes friendship meant witnessing someone's complete destruction and staying anyway. You remember what Grace used to say when things got bad? Beck stared at his beer. Which thing that pride's just fear dressed up in fancy clothes. That accepting help doesn't make you weak, it makes you human. Grace had the luxury of not needing help from people who'd make me feel like I owed them my soul. And if someone offered help with no strings, you'd still say no because you'd rather drown than admit you're drowning. The truth of it sat heavy between them. Beck had been self-sufficient since his father walked out when he was 12, leaving his mother to raise him on a teacher's salary while working nights cleaning offices. He'd learned early that depending on people meant getting disappointed, that the only person you could truly count on was yourself. Even Grace, who'd loved him completely, had died and left him alone with a toddler and medical bills that consumed everything. After Wyatt left, Beck checked on Finn, sleeping peacefully, oxygen levels stable, according to the home monitor Dr. Hendricks had prescribed. He pulled out his laptop, a 5-year-old Dell held together with electrical tape, and resumed the endless search for money that didn't exist. Bank loans denied due to debt-to-income ratio. Credit cards maxed at $18,000 across 3 accounts. GoFundMe $3,200 raised from $200,000 goal. Medical payment plans available but requiring down payments he couldn't produce. His email held 43 unread messages, mostly from collection agencies using various combinations of threats and sympathy to extract payments from a bank account that rarely held more than $200. One email stood out: the sender, a name he didn't recognize, but the subject line impossible to ignore, regarding your son's medical care. Beck clicked, expecting another scam offering loans at predatory rates. Instead, he found something stranger. A message from someone named Margaret Sutherland requesting a meeting tomorrow at 2 o'clock to discuss potential assistance with financing Finn's surgery. The address listed was in the Pearl District, the kind of office building where startups with too much venture capital burned through millions while pretending to change the world. He responded with a single question: "Who are you and how do you know about my son?" The reply came in seconds. "A mutual acquaintance suggested I might be able to help. Tomorrow at 2, I promise it's worth your time." Beck closed the laptop. Scam artists were getting sophisticated finding vulnerable targets through public records and hospital databases. But desperation made even obvious traps look like opportunities, and he was desperate enough to walk into anything that promised a solution. Sleep finally came around 3 in the morning, shallow and filled with dreams of drowning, while Finn watched from shore. The next day crawled toward 2 o'clock with agonizing slowness. Beck dropped Finn at Louise's apartment, worked a morning shift replacing a water heater in Northwest Portland, and arrived at the Pearl District address with 5 minutes to spare. The building was all glass and steel, the kind of aggressive modernity that announced its occupants had money and wanted everyone to know. Margaret Sutherland's office occupied the 7th floor in a suite belonging to Sterling Technologies. That name triggered recognition: Victoria Sterling, the woman from the bar. This had to be connected, though Beck couldn't fathom how or why a billionaire CEO would involve herself in his problems. The receptionist directed him to a corner office where a woman in her mid-30s sat behind a desk that probably cost more than his truck. Margaret Sutherland radiated competence and careful control, dark suit, perfectly tailored expression, giving away nothing. "Mr. Morrison, thank you for coming." "Who told you about my son?" She gestured to a chair. Beck remained standing, suspicion overriding manners. Margaret's mouth twitched with something that might have been approval. "Victoria Sterling mentioned she met you recently. She asked me to reach out regarding your son's medical situation." "And why would a billionaire care about some bartender's sick kid? Why don't you sit down and let me explain?" He sat more from exhaustion than compliance. Margaret opened a leather folder revealing documents that made Beck's stomach drop: medical records, financial statements, credit reports, everything about his life laid out in clinical detail. "Where did you get those?" "Ms. Sterling had you investigated. Before you get angry, understand that she does this with everyone she considers doing business with. It's not personal, it's how she operates." "Business? What kind of business involves stalking someone's medical records?" Margaret's expression softened microscopically. "Ms. Sterling saw you at the bar 2 nights ago. She was struck by your conversation and your situation. She'd like to help with Finn's surgery costs." "In exchange for what?" "Dinner." Beck laughed, the sound harsh in the quiet office. "A billionaire wants to pay 200 grand for a dinner date. That's the pitch." "Not exactly. Miss Sterling has a theory she'd like to test. She believes most men she encounters can't handle the reality of her life. The scrutiny, the pressure, the fundamental differences between her world and theirs. She's wagering you won't last 5 minutes once you see how she actually lives." "So this is what entertainment-rich woman wants to watch the poor guy squirm." Margaret leaned forward, voice dropping to something more genuine. "Uswas. Sterling is one of the loneliest people I know. She spent 10 years building an empire her father left her, proving herself to men who think she's too young and too female to run a technology company. Every relationship she's had has ended because someone wanted her money or her connections or her influence. She's exhausted by people who see her as a resource instead of a person. And I'm different because I'm broke." "You're different because you said no, because you turned her down without knowing who she was or what she could offer." That intrigued her. Beck stood heading for the door. "Tell Ms. Sterling I appreciate the creative approach, but I'm not interested in being someone's science experiment." "Mr. Morrison, your son needs surgery in 6 weeks. You have no way to pay for it. Pride doesn't keep 7-year-olds alive." He stopped hand on the doorknob. "So she leverages my dying kid to force me into dinner. That's supposed to make her seem less like a predator." "She's not forcing anything. She's offering help you desperately need. All she asks is one evening. If you're miserable, you leave after 5 minutes and she still pays for Finn's surgery. If you manage longer, maybe you both discover something worth pursuing." Beck turned back, studying Margaret with the focus he usually reserved for finding leak sources in complicated plumbing. "Why does she care what I think of her world?" "Because she's tired of performing, of pretending to be something she's not, to please people who'll never approve. You spoke to her like a human being for 3 hours without asking for anything. Do you have any idea how rare that is in her life? And if I agree to this dinner and decide her world is exactly as insufferable as she thinks, then you've given her confirmation and she gets to keep believing everyone will disappoint her. Either way, Finn gets his surgery." The calculation was simple and terrible. 5 minutes of discomfort, maybe mild humiliation in exchange for his son's life. The answer should have been obvious, but something in Beck resisted the implication that he was for sale. That desperation made him controllable, that his dignity had a price tag of exactly $200,000. I need to think about it. Margaret slid a business card across the desk. Ms. Sterling is meeting with investors in San Francisco tomorrow through Wednesday. Thursday night at 7. There's a restaurant called Castagna in Southeast. She'll be waiting. Beck pocketed the card, feeling like he'd already agreed to something irreversible. At the door, he paused. Tell me something honestly. Does she actually think this is going to work? Or is this just how bored rich people entertain themselves? Margaret's expression turned almost sad. I've known Tori since Harvard. I've watched her build an empire and lose herself in the process. This isn't entertainment, it's desperation that looks different because she can afford expensive packaging. The drive home took 40 minutes through Portland traffic that didn't care about moral dilemmas or dying children. Beck picked up Finn from Louise's heated-up leftover pizza and watched his son struggle through homework with the patience of someone rationing energy he didn't have. Daddy, what happens if I don't get the surgery? The question landed like a punch. Beck had been so careful to frame everything optimistically to shield Finn from the truth that his small body was failing and his father couldn't fix it. Why are you asking that? I heard Mrs. Louise on the phone. She was crying about someone who died because they couldn't afford medicine. Is that going to happen to me? Beck pulled his son close, breathing in the scent of grape shampoo and playground dust. No, I promise you whatever it takes, you're getting that surgery. Even if we have to move or sell stuff. Even then. Finn relaxed against him, trusting with the absolute faith of children who haven't learned yet that parents can't always keep their promises. Beck held him until he fell asleep, then carried him to bed and tucked him in with the stuffed triceratops he'd had since infancy. The business card sat on the kitchen table, white cardstock with elegant printing. Victoria Sterling, CEO Sterling Technologies. A phone number and email address, nothing else. No mission statement or company slogan, just a name and contact information that implied everyone already knew who she was. Beck called Wyatt, needing a sounding board that wouldn't judge. Remember that woman from the bar? The one you turned down? Her assistant offered to pay for Finn's surgery if I have dinner with her. Silence stretched across the line, punctuated by children's voices in Wyatt's background. The chaos of a full house, the noise of a family Beck used to have before cancer took Grace and left him with a hole that had never filled. That's either incredibly generous or deeply creepy. Both probably. She thinks I won't last 5 minutes in her world. Will you? I don't know. I don't care. If it saves Finn, I'll last 5 hours in hell. Wyatt was quiet for a beat. Then go with eyes open. Rich people don't give away 200 grand because they're bored. There's always strings, you just can't always see them until you're already tangled up. Thursday arrived with rain and Beck's escalating panic about appropriate attire. Victoria had offered to buy him a suit, an offer he'd refused on principle before remembering Grace's wisdom about pride. They compromised. She loaned him a suit that belonged to her father, held in storage since his death years ago, altered to fit Beck's broader shoulders. Wearing a dead man's clothes felt morbid until Victoria explained that her father would have liked. Beck would have appreciated his work ethic and honesty. The venue was downtown at some converted industrial space that managed to feel both cavernous and intimate, populated by people who moved through wealth like it was oxygen. Beck recognized faces from magazine covers and tech blogs, the architects of Portland's transformation from quirky city into innovation hub. Victoria materialized at his elbow, resplendent in something black and architectural that probably cost more than his truck. Breathe, you look like you're facing execution. Everyone's staring. They stare at everyone. It's what rich people do, evaluate whether you're worth their attention. She took his arms, steering them through the crowd with practiced ease. People gravitated toward Victoria with the automatic deference given to power conversations happening around Beck, like he was decorative furniture. He recognized the dynamic immediately. These people knew Victoria Sterling, the CEO, not Victoria, the woman who'd admitted to feeling trapped by her own success. The restaurant occupied a converted house in the Hawthorne district, the kind of place where reservations required 2 months' notice, and the menu didn't list prices because If you had to ask, you couldn't afford to eat there. Beck arrived 10 minutes early, gave Victoria's name to the hostess, and was directed to a private dining room that probably cost more to reserve than he'd spent on food in the last 6 months. She stood when he entered wearing something simple in black that probably cost more than his rent. In the restaurant's soft lighting, Victoria Sterling looked different than she had at the bar. More polished, more distant, more like the CEO whose face appeared in business magazines, and less like the woman who'd admitted to feeling trapped by her own success. You came. I wasn't certain you would. Beck took the offered chair, hyper-aware of how the borrowed suit pulled across his back. Didn't seem like I had much choice. Everyone has choices. You could have decided your pride mattered more than your son's health. Many people would. Then you don't know much about parents. A server appeared with wine Beck couldn't pronounce and wouldn't have been able to afford a single glass of. Victoria dismissed the bottle after a taste, ordering something else in French that made the server practically genuflect. The performance was subtle but clear. This was her world and he was a visitor who didn't speak the language. Margaret said you were upset about the investigation. Wouldn't you be? Someone digging through your life without permission, pulling medical records and financial statements. I do it with every potential business partner. It's not personal. Except I'm not a business partner. I'm a bartender you met once. Victoria's expression flickered with something that might have been embarrassment or recognition. You're right, I overstepped. I'm not particularly good at normal human interaction. I tend to approach everything like a transaction. The honesty surprised him. Beck had expected defensiveness, maybe condescension, not this admission of social failing. So what's the transaction here? You pay for my kid's surgery and I provide what entertainment? Confirmation that regular people can't handle your lifestyle. I suppose that's the cynical interpretation. What's the optimistic one? She was quiet while the server delivered food. Beck hadn't ordered plates of beautifully arranged things he couldn't identify but knew were expensive based on the portion sizes that would leave him hungry. Victoria waited until they were alone again. I'm 29 years old. I run a company with 3,000 employees and $17 billion in annual revenue. I have more money than I could spend in 10 lifetimes. And I'm lonelier than I've ever been because everyone I meet wants something from me. And I'm different because I'm broke. You're different because you said no, because you turned me down without calculating what you could gain from knowing me. That's so rare in my life, it felt almost fictional. Beck ate something that tasted like butter and herbs and cost probably $50. So you investigated me, found out about Finn, and decided to use my desperation as leverage to force another date. And when you phrase it that way, it sounds manipulative. Because it is manipulative. Victoria set down her fork, meeting his eyes with directness that felt almost aggressive. Yes, it is. I'm not particularly proud of it, but I've learned that straightforward approaches don't work with me. People see the money and become whoever they think I want them to be. I needed leverage to ensure you'd show up as yourself. And threatening my kid's health was the best leverage you could find. I'm not threatening anything. I'm offering help you need. All I'm asking for is honesty, 5 minutes of you being real with me instead of performing. If at any point you're miserable or uncomfortable, you leave. The surgery money doesn't change. 5 minutes and I can walk out with my blessing and $200,000 transferred to Children's Hospital Portland by Monday morning. Beck checked his watch with theatrical precision. Clock starts now. Victoria's laugh was unexpected and genuine, transforming her face from intimidating to something almost warm. That's exactly what I mean. Nobody talks to me like that. Maybe they should. They fell into conversation easier than Beck expected, though he remained hyper-aware of the 5-minute deadline ticking away. Victoria asked about Finn's condition with the focused attention of someone used to synthesizing complex information quickly. Beck found himself explaining ventricular septal defects and the cascade of complications that made surgery necessary, details he usually avoided because they reminded him how close he was to losing everything. You must be terrified. The simple acknowledgement hit harder than sympathy. Every second of every day, I wake up checking if he's still breathing. I watch him sleep and calculate how many more nights we have before his heart just stops. And his mother. Dead 4 years, ovarian cancer, 6 months from diagnosis to funeral. Victoria's expression shifted to something raw. I'm sorry, my father died of a heart attack when I was 23. At his desk working late, like always. They found him the next morning. That's rough. It's why I work the way I do. He built sterling technologies from nothing and then dropped dead before he could enjoy any of it. I've spent 6 years proving I could run what he created, and some days I wonder if I'm just recreating his mistakes. Beck glanced at his watch. 8 minutes had passed. He was supposed to have left 3 minutes ago, walking out with confirmation that rich people lived in a different universe he wanted no part of. Instead, he was still sitting here, engaged in a conversation that felt more genuine than most interactions he'd had in years. The 5 minutes are up. Victoria's face did something complicated between hope and resignation. So they are. I'm still hungry. These portions are ridiculous. Her laugh came easier this time, relief evident. Should we order actual food? If you're paying, absolutely. They stayed 3 more hours, conversation flowing through topics both profound and mundane. Victoria described the pressure of running a company at 29, of board members twice her age questioning every decision of male competitors who spoke to her chest during negotiations and called her sweetheart in meetings. Beck talked about working 3 jobs, about the exhaustion of single parenthood, about the particular shame of having your card declined, buying groceries while your kid watched. Why not declare bankruptcy? It would clear most of the debt and destroy my credit for 7 years. I'm barely holding on, as is bankruptcy would make everything from housing to employment exponentially harder, even if it meant less stress. Stress I can handle. It's the helplessness that's killing me. Watching Finn's health deteriorate and not being able to fix it. That's what keeps me up at night. Victoria was quiet, playing with her wine glass. I meant what I said about the surgery. Monday morning, $200,000 to Children's Hospital Portland. Finn gets scheduled immediately. What's the catch? No catch. Call it philanthropy if that makes it easier. Billionaires don't give away money without expecting something back. Then call it a selfish investment in proving I was wrong about the 5-minute theory. You lasted 3 hours. That means something. Beck wanted to argue to maintain the suspicion that protected him from disappointment, but Finn's face kept appearing in his mind, small and scared and trusting that his father would find a way. If I say yes to the money, what happens next? We have dinner again, or coffee, or whatever feels right. No expectations, no timeline. Just 2 people seeing if there's something worth exploring. And if there's not, then we had nice dinners and Finn got his surgery and everyone moves on with their lives. The server brought a check Victoria signed without looking at, probably charging more to her credit card than Beck made in 2 weeks. They walked out into Portland rain that had softened to mist, standing under the restaurant awning while she waited for her driver. The moment felt charged with possibility and danger in equal measure. Thank you for coming, for giving me a chance despite the manipulative setup. Beck pulled his keys from his pocket, already dreading the drive home in a truck with a heater that worked intermittently. I'm still not sure this is a good idea. Neither am I. But maybe that's the point, doing something we're unsure about instead of staying safe in our separate worlds. Her car arrived, sleek and black and expensive. She moved toward it, then stopped. Finn's surgery. I'll call Children's Hospital tomorrow and arrange everything. You don't have to do anything except show up when they schedule it. I need to pay you back. Not all of it, probably never all of it, but something. I can't just take... If it makes you feel better, we'll figure out a payment plan that doesn't crush you financially. But Beck, for tonight, just say yes. The use of his first name hit differently than Ms. Sterling's formal distance. He managed a nod, throat tight with emotions he didn't want to examine. Yes, and thank you. Same time next week. I'll let you know. He drove home with his mind spinning through implications and consequences. The money was real. Victoria Sterling didn't make promises she couldn't keep. By Monday, Finn would have surgery scheduled. The impossible would become possible because Beck had swallowed his pride and accepted help from someone who'd seen him at his lowest and offered a lifeline anyway. The call came Saturday morning, 2 days after dinner. Not Victoria, but Margaret Sutherland, her voice carrying professional warmth. Children's Hospital Portland received payment authorization. Dr. Hendricks can schedule Finn's surgery within 2 weeks if that timeline works. 2 weeks. Ms. Sterling requested expedited scheduling. Dr. Hendricks agreed it was medically necessary given Finn's recent episode. Beck's legs went weak. He sat heavily on the couch, phone pressed to his ear. This is real. This is real. Someone from the hospital will call Monday to coordinate dates and pre-op appointments. After disconnecting, Beck sat in silence, processing the impossible becoming possible. Finn appeared in the kitchen doorway, drawn by some parental sixth sense that detected emotional turbulence. What's wrong? Nothing's wrong, something's very right. You're getting your surgery bug. Finn's face cycled through confusion, hope, and fear in rapid succession. How did we win the lottery? Something like that. His son climbed onto the couch, burrowing into Beck's side with the unself-conscious affection of children who haven't learned yet that physical contact is complicated. Is she nice? The question carried weight, his son asking whether this stranger who'd saved his life was someone they could trust, whether accepting help meant inviting danger into their small world. I think so. I'm still figuring it out. Okay, but Dad, if she's not nice, we can give the money back, right? Beck kissed the top of his son's head, marveling at the simple morality of 7-year-olds who hadn't learned yet that real life rarely offered such clean choices. If she turns out not to be nice, we'll figure something out. But I think maybe she is. The next week passed in a blur of preoperative appointments and paperwork that transformed Finn from dying to savable. Dr. Hendricks scheduled surgery for February 14th, Valentine's Day, which felt either darkly ironic or weirdly appropriate. The hospital staff treated Beck differently now that payment was guaranteed, their warmth more genuine when they weren't worried about collections. Victoria texted twice brief messages checking how he was handling everything. Beck responded with equal brevity, still uncertain how to navigate this new dynamic. She'd saved his son's life. That created debt beyond money, the kind that couldn't be calculated or repaid on any schedule. Thursday night at 7, his phone rang, Victoria's name on the phone screen. I'm outside your building. Can I come up? Beck looked around the apartment, cramped and shabby in ways he usually ignored, but which suddenly felt humiliating. You really want to see how poor people live? I want to see where you live. There's a difference. He gave her the apartment number, spent 30 seconds shoving laundry into the bedroom, and opened the door to find Victoria Sterling standing in his hallway looking more uncomfortable than he'd ever seen her. She wore jeans and a sweater, the billionaire CEO costume abandoned for something almost normal, except for the driver waiting downstairs in a car worth more than Beck had made in his entire life. Come in. It's not much. It's more than enough. She stepped inside, taking in the space with careful attention. Finn's drawings covered the refrigerator, dinosaur-themed chaos documenting a 7-year-old's artistic evolution. The couch still held Beck's pillow and blanket from sleeping there. Medical bills were stacked on the coffee table because he'd given up pretending they didn't exist. This is cozy. That's rich person speak for tiny. Victoria smiled, settling onto the couch with permission. It's honest. My house is 7,000 square feet and feels empty even when it's full of people. That might be the saddest thing I've ever heard. Welcome to success. It's lonelier than advertised. Finn appeared from his room, alerted by voices and curious about visitors. He stopped when he saw Victoria, eyes going wide. Are you Dad's girlfriend? Beck felt his face burn. Finn, this is Ms. Sterling. I'm Tori, and I'm your dad's friend. Maybe girlfriend eventually if I don't mess it up. Finn studied her with the unnerving directness of children evaluating strangers. Do you like dinosaurs? I don't know much about them. That's okay. I can teach you. Do you want to see my collection? Before Beck could intervene, Finn had grabbed Victoria's hand and dragged her into his room, narrating an enthusiastic tour of plastic stegosauruses and triceratops figures arranged with the careful precision of someone who took his obsession seriously. Victoria listened with apparent genuine interest, asking questions that made Finn's explanations grow more animated. Beck watched from the doorway, heart doing complicated things in his chest. This woman, who runs a billion-dollar company, was sitting cross-legged on his son's floor, handling cheap plastic dinosaurs like they were precious artifacts, giving Finn the kind of focused attention that made the boy glow with happiness. This is Rexy. He's a Tyrannosaurus, but he's friendly, not like in the movies. And this is Spike. He's a Stegosaurus, which is my favorite because they have the cool plates and the Thagomizer. The Thagomizer, the spiky tail, It's named after a Far Side cartoon, even though it's a real scientific term now. Victoria glanced at Beck, eyebrows raised. Your son is remarkably well informed about dinosaurs. It's basically his entire personality. I like dinosaurs because they were real, not made up like dragons or unicorns. They actually walked around millions of years ago, and we can prove it with fossils and science. That's a good reason to like something. Facts matter. Finn nodded seriously. Dad says facts matter too. He says people lie all the time, but numbers don't lie. Your dad is right, though sometimes people make numbers lie too. Beck's phone timer went off Finn's bedtime medicine. He retrieved pills from the kitchen, the nightly ritual that marked time until surgery made them unnecessary. Finn took them without complaint, used to the routine, while Victoria watched with an expression Beck couldn't quite read. I should let you do bedtime. Finn grabbed her hand again. Can you stay just for the story? Victoria looked to Beck for permission. He nodded, curious and slightly terrified about how this would play out. They settled into the bedtime routine, Finn in his bed, Beck in the chair beside it, Victoria standing awkwardly near the door, until Finn patted the bed and she sat with careful precision. The story was one of Finn's favorites, a picture book about a lonely dinosaur finding his herd. Beck had read it hundreds of times, could practically recite it from memory. But tonight he found himself paying more attention to Victoria's reactions, the way her expression softened at the lonely dinosaur's journey, the slight dampness in her eyes when the dinosaur finally found others like him. Finn fell asleep before the story finished, exhausted from the day and the medication that made him drowsy. Beck tucked him in, pressed a kiss to his forehead, and motioned Victoria back to the living room where they could talk without waking him. Thank you for coming. You didn't have to. I wanted to meet him, to see what she stopped herself. What you're investing in. That's not what I meant. But it's accurate. You paid 200 grand. That buys a certain amount of access. Victoria's face tightened. I didn't come here to claim ownership of your gratitude. I came because I wanted to know the person I was helping. Wuss, why you could have just sent the money and never thought about us again. She was quiet for a long moment, looking at Finn's drawings on the refrigerator. My father used to say that money is only good for two things: building something meaningful and helping people you care about. He died before doing enough of either. I've spent 6 years building, but I haven't done much helping. When I met you, saw your situation, it felt like maybe I could do something that actually mattered. Finn matters, more than anything. He's lucky to have you. He'd be luckier to have a father who could afford his surgery without charity from billionaires. The words came out harsher than intended. Victoria stood gathering her things with the careful movements of someone trying not to show hurt. I should go. I didn't mean to intrude on your evening. Beck caught her arm before she reached the door. Wait, I'm sorry. That was unfair. It was honest. I can handle honesty. You saved my son's life. I don't know how to thank you for that. Anything I say sounds inadequate. You don't have to thank me. Just let me be part of it, the surgery, the recovery, whatever comes next. Not as an obligation, but as someone who wants to be here. The request carried vulnerability that surprised Beck. This woman who commanded boardrooms and closed billion-dollar deals was asking permission to be included in his small, broken life. Why would you want that? My life is chaos and stress and worrying constantly that everything's going to collapse. Because your chaos is real. My life is performing for people who are evaluating every move, every word, every decision. With you, I can just be tired and scared and human. You want to be human around the poor people. That's your slumming hobby. I want to be human around someone who sees me as a person instead of a resource. Beck stepped back, letting her arm go. You can stay, if you want. It's late, and your driver's been waiting. He's paid to wait. Still seems cruel to make him sit in the cold. Victoria smiled, something genuine breaking through her careful control. You're right, that is cruel. She texted someone, then looked back at Beck. I told him to go home. I'll call a rideshare when I'm ready to leave. They settled onto the couch, maintaining careful distance. Beck turned it on the television at low volume, found a cooking show neither of them cared about. The silence wasn't uncomfortable exactly, but it carried weight. Two people from fundamentally different worlds trying to find common ground that might not exist. Can I ask you something personal? Victoria nodded. Always. Why the 5-minute bet? What made you think I couldn't handle your life? She was quiet so long. Beck thought she wouldn't answer. When she spoke, her voice carried exhaustion that ran deeper than physical tiredness. Every man I've dated has left within 6 months. Some because they couldn't handle people treating them like my accessory. Some because they felt emasculated by my success. Some because they realized they'd never be able to provide for me the way men are supposed to provide. The pattern became predictable, an initial excitement followed by a slow withdrawal, followed by them leaving, while insisting it wasn't about the money even though it always was. So you decided I'd be the same. I decided everyone is the same. That 5 minutes of real exposure to my world would remind you that we live in different universes, and trying to bridge them would only hurt us both. And now I think maybe I was wrong. Or maybe you're different. Or maybe I'm desperate enough to believe someone could stay. Beck shifted closer, taking her hand with a boldness that surprised him. I can't promise I'll stay. I barely know you, but I can promise I won't leave because of your money. If I leave, it'll be because you're insufferable or cruel or any of the normal reasons people break up. Those are terrible promises. They're honest ones. Victoria's laugh was tired and real. I'll take honesty over pretty lies. They sat like that until nearly midnight, talking about nothing important and everything that mattered. Victoria left with a genuine goodbye instead of the performance she probably used with most people. Beck watched her rideshare disappear down the street, then returned to his apartment feeling more hopeful than he had in months. Monday morning arrived with a call from Children's Hospital Portland confirming Finn's surgery for February 14th at 7 a.m. Beck arranged time off from all three jobs, contacted Louise about staying with Finn before and after, and began the mental preparation for watching his son's chest get cut open and his tiny heart repaired by steady hands and expensive equipment. Victoria texted that evening, "How are you feeling about the surgery?" Terrified. "Want company at the hospital?" "You don't have to do that." "I know, but I'd like to, if you want me there." Beck stared at his phone at an offer that felt simultaneously generous and invasive. Having her at the hospital meant inviting her into the worst moment of his life, trusting her with his vulnerability in ways that terrified him. But the alternative, facing 6 hours of surgery alone while Finn's life hung in balance, felt somehow worse. "Yes, I'd like you there." The weeks before surgery passed with agonizing slowness, each day marked by Finn's declining energy and Beck's mounting anxiety. Valentine's Day arrived cold and clear, the universe apparently having a sense of irony. Beck and Finn arrived at Children's Hospital Portland at 5 a.m. for pre-op prep. Louise came along for support, her weathered face trying for optimism, while her eyes betrayed terror. Victoria appeared at 6 dressed simply and carrying coffee for everyone. She settled into the waiting area without fanfare, becoming part of their small circle through sheer presence. When Finn was wheeled away at 6:58, Beck felt like his heart was being removed along with his son. The waiting room was designed for families in crisis, comfortable chairs that couldn't make anyone comfortable magazines. Nobody read a television playing the news with the sound off. Beck sat motionless, hands clasped between his knees, while Louise knitted something complicated, and Victoria worked on her laptop with focused intensity that was probably just managing panic. An hour passed. Beck got up to pace, sat back down, got up again. Victoria's hand found his cool and steady. "He's going to be okay." "You can't know that." "I can believe it. Sometimes that's enough." Hour 2, a nurse appeared with updates, surgery progressing, normally, vitals stable, no complications. Beck tried to feel reassured and only felt more terrified. Hour 3, Louise went for coffee, came back with sandwiches nobody wanted. Beck forced himself to eat because Victoria told him to, and arguing required energy he didn't have. Hour 4, the waiting room filled with other families, other crises, other people learning that hospitals were places where time stopped, meaning anything except the distance between now and knowing. Hour 5. Beck's composure cracked, tears he'd been holding back for weeks, suddenly unstoppable. Victoria pulled him close, let him break against her shoulder, didn't offer empty reassurances or tell him everything would be fine. She just held him while he shattered. "I can't lose him. I already lost Grace. I can't." Her grip tightened. "You're not going to lose him." Hour 6, Dr. Hendricks appeared in surgical scrubs, face showing exhaustion and satisfaction. Beck stood so fast his vision went gray. Mr. Morrison, the surgery was successful. Finn's heart is repaired and he's being moved to recovery. He's asking for someone named Mr. Triceratops. Relief hit like a physical blow. Beck's legs gave way. Victoria caught him, held him upright while he sobbed with gratitude and leftover terror. Louise was crying too, her knitting abandoned. Even Victoria's eyes looked suspiciously damp. Can I see him? Give us 20 minutes to get him settled. Then you can come back. Those 20 minutes lasted forever. When they finally led Beck to recovery, Finn looked small and pale in a hospital bed too big for him, monitors beeping steady confirmation that his repaired heart was working properly. His eyes opened when Beck approached, unfocused from medication but aware enough to smile. Dad? Hey, Bug, you did great. Did they fix it? Good as new. Finn's gaze drifted past Beck to Victoria standing in the doorway. Tori came. She did. She wanted to make sure you were okay. That's nice of her. Victoria moved closer, her usual confidence replaced by something more tentative. How are you feeling? Tired, and it hurts. That's normal. The doctors say you're going to heal perfectly. Finn's eyes were already closing again, pulled under by exhaustion and medication. Dad, I'm glad you have Tori now, so you're not alone. The simple statement hit Beck harder than anything else that day. His 7-year-old son, recovering from heart surgery, was worried about his father being lonely. Victoria's hand found Beck's again, squeezing gently. Later, after Finn had been moved to a private room and Louise had gone home to rest, Beck and Victoria sat in the darkened hospital corridor. Exhaustion had stripped away their usual defenses, leaving something more honest in the space between them. Thank you for being here, for everything. I wouldn't have been anywhere else. Why, this isn't your problem. Finn isn't your son. You barely know us. Victoria was quiet, choosing her words carefully. At dinner, you asked me why I really made the 5-minute bet. The honest answer, I was testing myself as much as you. Trying to prove that caring about someone, letting them matter, would just lead to disappointment like always. But then I met Finn tonight, and I watched you break apart in that waiting room, and I realized something. What? I don't want to be right anymore. I don't want everyone to disappoint me. I want this, whatever this is with you and Finn, to work. Even though it terrifies me. Maybe especially because it terrifies me. Beck turned to face her, fully taking in the vulnerability she rarely showed. I'm not going to lie and say this doesn't scare me too. You're way out of my league. You have resources and connections I can't match. At some point, you're going to realize how much work it is to date someone poor, and you'll move on to someone easier. That's a pretty bleak prediction. It's a realistic one. Rich people don't usually stay with broke bartenders. Victoria's expression hardened into something more determined. Then I guess we're both betting against expectations. You think I'll leave because you're poor. I think you'll leave because I'm too much work. Maybe we should just agree to prove each other wrong. And if we can't, then at least we tried. That's more than most people manage. Beck leaned his head back against the hospital wall, closing eyes that burned from exhaustion and emotion. 5 minutes turned into 6 hours. Best money I ever spent. They sat in comfortable silence, two people who'd started from opposite ends of possibility and somehow found themselves in the same hospital corridor, betting on something neither quite believed in, but both desperately wanted. Finn's recovery took 3 weeks of hospital monitoring, followed by 2 months of restricted activity that made an 8-year-old boy climb walls with boredom. Beck navigated the aftermath with Victoria appearing at unpredictable intervals, bringing Finn new dinosaur books, sitting with Beck during follow-up appointments, existing in their lives without demanding space she hadn't earned. The relationship evolved through accumulated moments rather than grand gestures, intimacy built from shared exhaustion and gradual trust. 6 months after surgery, Finn ran without stopping to catch his breath. The transformation was miraculous and mundane, simultaneously a child doing what children should do, his repaired heart pumping efficiently through activities that would have left him gasping months earlier. Beck watched from playground benches while Finn chased friends across wood chips and climbing structures, feeling gratitude so intense it bordered on religious experience. Victoria joined them one Saturday in late August, dressed in jeans and a blazer that probably cost more than Beck's monthly rent, but looked almost normal in the right light. Finn spotted her approaching and broke away from his game to barrel into her legs with the unself-conscious affection he'd developed over months of her consistent presence. Miss Tori watched me on the monkey bars. She settled beside Beck close enough that their shoulders touched. He's doing well. Better than well. The cardiologist said his heart function is completely normal. No restrictions, no limitations. Just a regular kid. That must feel incredible. Beck turned to look at her properly, this woman who'd walked into his life through a barred door and somehow stayed through the worst of it. You made this possible. I don't say it enough, but if you thank me again, I'm leaving. I was going to say I'm glad you're here. Her expression softened into something vulnerable. That's better. They watched Finn navigate the monkey bars with determined concentration, his tongue poking out the way it always did when he focused. Other parents populated the playground with the weekend energy of people grateful for outdoor entertainment that cost nothing. A few glanced at Victoria with the particular curiosity reserved for someone who clearly didn't belong in this neighborhood park, but had shown up anyway. People are staring. Victoria shrugged. They always stare. I stopped caring around the time I turned 25 and realized nobody would ever look at me without calculating my net worth. That sounds exhausting. It's why I like coming here. Your world judges me differently, not as insufficient, but as possibly fraudulent. It's refreshingly honest. Beck's phone buzzed with a text from Wyatt asking about their poker game next week. He responded quickly, then pocketed the device. We're going out for Finn's birthday next month. Nothing fancy, just pizza and arcade games. You should come. You want me at his birthday party? Finn asked if you'd be there. I told him I'd invite you. Victoria was quiet, watching Finn hang upside down from the monkey bars while shrieking with delight. What if I'm terrible at children's birthday parties? Then you'll fit right in. Nobody's good at them. We all just survive until cake. She laughed, the sound carrying genuine amusement. All right, pizza and arcade games. I'll try not to accidentally buy the restaurant. September arrived with the particular light of Portland autumn, everything golden and temporary. Finn's 8th birthday party convened at a pizza place that smelled like grease and childhood, populated by a dozen kids from his class and the exhausted parents who'd drawn birthday party duty. Beck had budgeted carefully for this: $40 for pizza, $20 for games, another $15 for cake. Victoria showed up with a present wrapped in dinosaur paper that probably cost more than everything else combined, but which she presented with enough casual grace that nobody seemed to notice the expensive watch on her wrist or the fact that her casual outfit likely cost a month of Beck's salary. Finn tore through presents with appropriate enthusiasm, pausing longest on Victoria's gift, a detailed model triceratops skeleton that came with a book about paleontology and actual fossil fragments embedded in resin. His eyes went wide with the particular awe of children receiving exactly what they wanted without knowing they wanted it. This is the best present ever. Victoria flushed with pleasure, awkward in a way Beck rarely saw. I'm glad you like it. The woman at the Science Museum helped me pick it out. Wyatt materialized at Beck's elbow, beer in hand. Despite the alcohol-free venue, he'd smuggled it in a coffee thermos with the expertise of someone who'd been sneaking drinks into kid events for years. Your girlfriend just made every other adult look cheap. She's not my girlfriend. You've been dating 6 months. She stayed through Finn's surgery. She's here at his birthday party, surrounded by screaming children. Brother, she's your girlfriend. The label felt simultaneously premature and overdue. They'd been navigating some undefined space between dating and something more serious, both of them circling commitment like it was a trap that might spring shut. Beck had learned Victoria's coffee order and the way she tensed her shoulders when stressed. She'd learned which of his silences meant processing and which meant shutting down. They existed in each other's lives with increasing permanence, but hadn't named what they were building. The kids migrated to arcade games, fed quarters by parents who calculated the cost of peace. Finn dragged Victoria toward a racing game, insisting she needed to learn proper Mario Kart technique. Beck watched them through the crowd. Victoria bent over the controls with competitive intensity, while Finn provided running commentary on her driving deficiencies. Wyatt nudged him. You're going to marry her. That's a hell of a leap. I've known you since we were 14. I watched you fall in love with Grace. You're doing it again, same look, same careful attention, same fear. I'm not afraid. You're terrified. She's rich, successful, operates in a completely different world. You think eventually she'll wake up and realize she can do better. The observation hit harder because it was accurate. Beck had been waiting 6 months for Victoria to recognize their fundamental incompatibility, to get bored with the limitations of dating someone who worked 3 jobs and still barely covered rent. Instead, she kept showing up, kept fitting herself into the spaces of his life, kept choosing them when she could have chosen anything. The party wound down with cake and the case of sugar-fueled children. Parents collected offspring with relief, thanking Beck with the weary solidarity of people who'd survived another birthday milestone. Victoria helped clean up, gathering paper plates and cups with the focused efficiency she brought to everything looking slightly ridiculous, wiping down tables in designer jeans. After Finn crashed on the couch at home, exhausted from excitement and arcade games, Beck found Victoria on the apartment building's fire escape, Portland spread below in lights and rain. She'd discovered this spot months ago, claimed it as her escape when the apartment got too small or she needed distance from her own thoughts. You didn't have to stay and clean up. She turned silhouette framed against the city. I wanted to. It felt normal. Good normal. Beck settled beside her on the rusted metal shoulders touching in the cramped space. Finn had a great time. Thank you for the gift and for being here. Stop thanking me. Stop giving me reasons to thank you. They sat in comfortable silence, the kind that had developed over months of learning each other's rhythms. Victoria's head drifted to Beck's shoulder with the casual intimacy of people growing familiar. His arm came around her, automatically pulling her closer against the September chill. I need to tell you something. Beck's stomach tightened. This was it, the moment she'd explained that 6 months had been fun, but she was moving on to someone from her own world. Okay. I love you. I'm in love with you. And it terrifies me because everyone I've ever loved has either left or died or proven themselves disappointingly human. But there it is. I love you and Finn and this ridiculous life we're building. The confession hung in the damp air, vulnerable and brave. Beck's throat closed around words that wouldn't come. Victoria pulled back slightly, reading his silence as rejection. You don't have to tee it back. I just needed you to know. I'm scared. Her laugh was bitter. That's one way to respond to a love confession. Let me finish. I'm scared because I love you too. Because when Grace died, I promised myself I'd never risk that pain again. Because loving you means admitting I need you, and needing people has only ever ended badly for me. Victoria's hand found his in the darkness, fingers lacing together. So we're both terrified. Apparently. Want to be terrified together? Beck pulled her close, kissing her with the accumulated want of 6 months of careful distance. She responded immediately, hands fisting in his shirt, the kiss deepening into something that tasted like possibility and risk in equal measure. When they broke apart, both were breathing hard, foreheads pressed together in the cramped fire escape space. That was our first real kiss. About damn time. They stumbled back inside momentum, carrying them to the couch where Beck slept. The apartment was too small for privacy with Finn in the next room, but they navigated the limitations with urgent creativity, rediscovering each other through touch and whispered promises. Afterward, Victoria lay against him, skin warm despite the apartment's persistent chill. Stay. She lifted her head. I don't have clothes here. Wear mine. Stay. Victoria settled back down, voice soft with something that might have been wonder. Okay. The next morning, Finn discovered them tangled together on the couch and accepted Victoria's presence with the easy adaptability of children who process change better than adults. He climbed over them to turn on cartoons, chattering about his birthday presents, while Beck and Victoria surfaced slowly from sleep. 3 months of domestic routine followed Victoria staying over with increasing frequency, her expensive clothes mixing with Beck's thrift store wardrobe in ways that amused them both. She kept a drawer at his apartment filled with practical things that marked this as more than temporary. Beck kept a bag at her Hillsborough house for weekends when Finn wanted to swim in her pool or they all needed escape from cramped quarters. The arrangement worked until March, when Ellen Morrison's facility called with news that shattered their careful equilibrium. Beck's mother had developed pneumonia complicated by her dementia and general frailty. The hospitalization would cost $45,000, a number so absurd, Beck laughed when the billing department quoted it. Insurance covers 80%, which leaves 9,000 out of pocket that I don't have. The woman on the phone maintained professional sympathy. We can arrange a payment plan. Beck hung up staring at bills he'd barely managed to control. The surgery debt had consumed everything. Even with Victoria's help, he was still 70,000 in the hole from years of accumulated medical costs and life expenses. Adding another 45,000 felt less like a setback and more like drowning while someone threw anchors. He didn't tell Victoria. Instead, Beck picked up extra shifts, returning to the brutal schedule of 3 jobs that left him perpetually exhausted. Finn noticed first his father arriving home past bedtime gone, before breakfast present in body but absent in attention. Victoria noticed second her messages going unanswered for hours, dinner plans canceled, with vague excuses. Wyatt noticed third and called Beck on it 2 weeks into the spiral. They met at a dive bar after Beck's evening shift ended at 11, both nursing cheap beer and exhaustion. "You look like hell." "Thanks, that's helpful." "Ellen's in the hospital again." Beck's head snapped up. "How did you know?" "Louise told my wife. You know how the neighborhood works. Everyone knows everything." "Why didn't you tell Tori?" "It's not her problem." Wyatt's expression cycled through exasperation into something harder. "That's the dumbest thing you've ever said, and you once tried to fix a garbage disposal with your bare hand." "My mother's medical bills aren't Victoria's responsibility." "No, but you are. You're her boyfriend, her partner, or whatever label you're using. Partners share problems." Beck finished his beer, already regretting coming out. "She's done enough. Surgery, helping with bills, being part of our lives. I can't keep taking from her like she's an ATM." "Did she say that?" "She doesn't have to. Eventually she'll realize I'm just an expensive project and move on to someone who doesn't need constant rescue." Wyatt ordered another round despite Beck's protest. "You're sabotaging because you think it's easier to push her away than wait for her to leave." The accuracy stung. Beck had spent 3 weeks avoiding meaningful conversation, canceling plans, keeping Victoria at a distance that felt safer than vulnerability. She'd texted earlier asking if everything was okay. He'd responded with fine and ignored her follow-up questions. "I'm protecting her from getting trapped in my mess." "You're protecting yourself from getting hurt. There's a difference." Beck left the bar at midnight, drove home through Portland rain that never stopped, and found Victoria's car parked outside his building. She sat in the driver's seat, engine off, clearly waiting. He approached with dread, knowing this conversation would either fix or destroy what they'd built. She rolled down the window. "Get in. It's late, you should go home." "Get in the car, Beck." He climbed into the passenger seat, immediately struck by how the interior smelled like her perfume and expensive leather. Victoria didn't start the engine, just turned to face him with expression somewhere between furious and devastated. "What's going on?" "Nothing. I've been busy with work." "Don't lie to me. I know about your mother. Maggie has a friend who works at the hospital administration. They called about coordinating payment." "So you had me investigated again?" "That's your solution to relationship problems." "I got a courtesy call from someone trying to help. Stop deflecting and tell me why you've been avoiding me for 3 weeks." The question hung between them, demanding honesty Beck didn't want to give. He stared through the windshield at his building's peeling paint, at the life he'd built from poverty and determination. "I'm 115,000 in debt. Medical bills for Finn, for my mother, credit cards I maxed years ago trying to keep us fed and housed. You paid for surgery, but everything else is still there, accumulating interest, crushing me slowly." "Why didn't you tell me?" "Because you've done enough. Because I don't want to be the broke boyfriend who needs constant rescue. Because eventually you'll wake up and realize you could be with someone who adds to your life instead of draining it." Victoria's expression shifted through several emotions before settling on something that looked like hurt. "Is that really what you think, that I'm keeping score of what I've given you?" "Everyone keeps score eventually." "I'm not everyone." Beck's hands clenched in his lap. "You're a billionaire dating a bartender. At some point, reality reasserts itself, and you remember you can do better." The silence that followed was terrible, filled with everything breaking. Victoria gripped the steering wheel, knuckles white. "I can't believe I'm hearing this. After everything, after 6 months of showing up, of being part of your life, of loving Finn like he's mine, You still think I'm going to leave because you're not rich enough. I think you're going to leave because I'm too much work. And there it is, the real issue. You don't trust that anyone would stay for you instead of despite you. The accusation landed perfectly, cutting through Beck's defenses to the fear underneath. He'd been abandoned by his father, lost grace to cancer, watched people exit his life with enough consistency to recognize the pattern. Expecting Victoria to be different felt like setting himself up for inevitable disappointment. Grace died. My dad left. People don't stay. Victoria's voice went quiet, dangerous. Grace didn't leave, she died of cancer. That's not abandonment, that's tragedy. And your father was a coward who had nothing to do with your worth. I'm neither dying nor a coward, but I am exhausted from proving myself to someone who's already decided I'll fail. I'm not asking you to prove anything. Yes, you are. Every time you hide problems from me, every time you push me away, you're testing whether I'll stay through difficulty. Well, here's your answer. I won't stay if you won't let me in. I can handle poverty and debt and complicated family situations. I can't handle a partner who treats me like I'm one bad day away from abandoning him. Beck turned to face her, fully seeing tears on her face that made his chest ache. I don't know how to do this, how to need someone without losing myself. Then figure it out, because I love you and Finn more than I've loved anything, but I won't beg for permission to be part of your life. Either you want me here, really here through the hard stuff, or you don't. But you need to decide. She started the engine, clear dismissal. Beck climbed out, watching her drive away with the sinking certainty that he'd just destroyed the best thing that had happened to him in years. The apartment felt emptier than usual, silence oppressive. Finn was sleeping at Louise's for the night, leaving Beck alone with consequences of his own making. Sleep came in patches, interrupted by the replay of Victoria's words and the recognition that she was right. He had been testing her, waiting for her to fail, so busy protecting himself from future pain that he'd created the disaster he feared. At 3 a.m., Beck gave up on rest, made coffee, and stared at his phone with the coward's debate of whether to text or call or show up at her house unannounced. Wyatt called at 6 somehow, aware of the situation through the neighborhood intelligence network that knew everything before it happened. What did you do? Exactly what you said I would. Pushed her away. And she left. Told me to decide if I actually want her in my life. Do you? The answer should have been immediate, but Beck forced himself to sit with the question, to examine beneath the fear to what he actually felt. Life without Victoria meant going back to how things were before, survivable but lonely, functional but hollow. She'd become woven through their days, her presence transforming struggle into something shared. Finn loved her. Beck loved her. The only obstacle was his own terror of loss. Yes, I want her here. Then stop being an idiot and tell her that. Beck waited until 7:30, late enough to be reasonable, early enough to show urgency. He drove to Victoria's house in the hills, the modern glass structure she inhabited alone most nights, despite having space for dozens. His truck looked absurd in her driveway, rust and poverty against architectural achievement. The front door opened before he knocked, Victoria standing there in workout clothes with expression carefully neutral. I'm sorry. She didn't move. For what specifically? For pushing you away, for treating you like you're temporary when you've proven you're not, for being so scared of losing you that I was making it inevitable. And I need help with my mother's bills, with everything. I need you, and I'm terrified of needing you, but I'm more terrified of losing you because I'm too proud to be honest. Victoria stepped back, allowing him inside. Her house smelled like coffee in the particular silence of wealth. Tell me about your mother's situation. They settled in her kitchen, all marble and stainless steel, designed by someone who never actually cooked. Beck explained Ellen's pneumonia, the mounting costs, his desperate scramble to cover bills while maintaining pride. Victoria listened without interruption, her expression giving away nothing. $45,000 for hospitalization. Insurance covers most of it. I'm on the hook for $9,000. And you have $70,000 in other debt. Give or take. I've been making minimum payments, but the interest keeps it essentially static. Victoria pulled out her phone, typed quickly. I'm transferring $20,000 to your account. That covers your mother's bills, plus gives you cushion for emergency expenses. The remaining debt will structure as a loan at zero interest. You pay me back at whatever rate doesn't crush you financially. I can't. You can and you will, not because I'm buying you or your gratitude, but because I have resources and you need help, and that's what people do for each other. Beck's throat worked around words that wouldn't form. The offer was simultaneously too much and exactly what he needed, generosity that felt impossible to accept or refuse. Why would you do this? Victoria's expression finally cracked, showing the vulnerability underneath. Because I love you. Because Finn needs you healthy and present, not working yourself to death across 3 jobs. Because for 6 months, you've given me something I've never had, a real relationship with someone who sees me as a person instead of a resource. This is me investing in us, not saving you. I don't know how to let people take care of me. Then learn, because partnerships aren't about one person doing all the giving while the other performs independence. They're about being strong enough to be weak together. The phrase hung in the air, wisdom wrapped in grammar that didn't quite work but made perfect sense. Beck crossed the kitchen, pulling Victoria into his arms with relief that bordered on collapse. She held him tight, her body fitting against his with the comfortable familiarity they'd developed over months of careful building. I'm sorry I pushed you away. Her voice came muffled against his shoulder. I'm sorry I didn't push back harder sooner. They stood like that until coffee went cold, 2 people who'd nearly destroyed something precious, learning to hold on instead of letting go. Later, Victoria made breakfast eggs. She burned slightly, and toast that was almost carbon, making Beck laugh for the first time in weeks. You're terrible at cooking. I'm terrible at domestic tasks generally. My housekeeper quit because I tried to do my own laundry and destroyed $5,000 of designer clothes. How do you destroy clothes in a washing machine? Apparently, cashmere doesn't like hot water, or bleach, or being washed at all. The domesticity felt healing after weeks of distance. They cleaned up together, Victoria loading the dishwasher wrong, until Beck gently corrected her, both of them laughing at how she'd accumulated wealth without basic life skills. Afterward, they returned to bed not for sex, but for the closeness of holding each other, rebuilding intimacy, one moment at a time. I want you to come to something next week. Beck traced patterns on her shoulder. What's the occasion? Sterling Technologies is hosting a charity gala. Very boring, lots of people I'm obligated to smile at. But I'd like you there, officially as my partner, not hiding in shadows. Your world intimidates me. My world intimidates everyone. But you've survived worse than cocktail parties with tech billionaires. Plus, there's an open bar and catering that costs more per person than most people spend on groceries monthly. That's not reassuring. It should be. You'll eat $70 of appetizers and judge rich people while they judge you back. It'll be terrible and hilarious in equal measure. Beck agreed despite reservations, recognizing this as Victoria's version of bringing him into her life the way he'd brought her into Finn's birthday party. They were weaving their separate existences into something shared, each step requiring courage neither felt but both chose. The gala arrived with spring rain and Beck's escalating panic about appropriate attire. Victoria had offered to buy him a suit, an offer he'd refused before remembering Wyatt's advice about accepting help. They compromised. She loaned him a suit that belonged to her father, held in storage since his death years ago, altered to fit Beck's broader shoulders. Wearing a dead man's clothes felt morbid until Victoria explained that her father would have liked Beck, would have appreciated his work ethic and honesty. The venue was downtown at some converted industrial space that managed to feel both cavernous and intimate, populated by people who moved through wealth like it was oxygen. Beck recognized faces from magazine covers and tech blogs, the architects of Portland's transformation from quirky city into innovation hub. Victoria materialized at his elbow, resplendent in something black and architectural that probably cost more than his truck. Breathe, you look like you're facing execution. Everyone's staring. They stare at everyone. It's what rich people do, evaluate whether you're worth their attention. She took his arms, steering them through the crowd with practiced ease. People gravitated toward Victoria with the automatic deference given to power conversations happening around Beck, like he was decorative furniture. He recognized the dynamic immediately. These people knew Victoria Sterling, the CEO, not Victoria, the woman who cried during children's movies or burned eggs because she never learned to cook. An hour into forced socializing, Beck excused himself to the bathroom, needing escape from performative networking. He found quiet in the venue's back hallway, leaning against exposed brick while trying to regulate breathing. Footsteps approached a man in his late 30s, expensive suit expression, calculating. You're Beck Morrison, the bartender. Do we know each other? The man extended a hand. Harrison Webb. I sit on Sterling Technologies board. Victoria's mentioned you. Nothing good, I'm sure. Harrison's smile was sharper than friendly. On the contrary, she speaks about you with unusual warmth. I admit I'm curious about the man who's captured her attention. Just two people trying to make something work. Of course. Though the circumstances are rather unusual, successful billionaire dating a working-class bartender. One wonders about sustainability. Beck's hands clenched violence, simmering beneath forced civility. You think we won't last? I think love is admirable but insufficient foundation for relationships built across such fundamental divides. Eventually, practical considerations reassert themselves, but I hope you prove me wrong. Victoria deserves happiness. Before Beck could respond, Victoria appeared, her expression hardening as she registered the conversation. Harrison, harassing my guests. Just making friendly conversation. Your version of friendly involves reminding people of their socioeconomic inadequacy. It's charming at board meetings, but less so at social events. Harrison retreated with parting smile that promised this wasn't finished. Victoria turned to Beck, concern evident. What did he say? That we won't last because of class differences. Harrison's an ass who resents that I kept my father's company instead of selling to his venture capital firm. Don't listen to him. What if he's right, though? Victoria was silent long enough to make Beck's stomach drop. When she spoke, her voice carried careful honesty. I've dated people from different backgrounds. Some relationships ended because they couldn't handle my world. Some ended because I realized we wanted fundamentally different lives. But none of them were you. What makes me different? You're the first person who's made me want to change my world instead of finding someone who fits into it. I don't want you to become comfortable with galas and board meetings. I want to become comfortable with playground, birthday parties, and apartments where we can hear neighbors through walls. You're not the experiment. You're the real thing I've been searching for. The confession eased something tight in Beck's chest. They returned to the gala as a unit, Victoria refusing to leave his side as she navigated obligatory conversations. Beck watched her perform the CEO role with new appreciation. This wasn't her natural state, but a costume she wore for professional survival, no more authentic than his own careful navigation of spaces that weren't built for people like him. Later, after the event wound down and they'd escaped to Victoria's car, she drove them not to her house, but to Beck's apartment. They climbed the stairs together, letting themselves into the small space that felt more home than her architectural achievement ever had. Finn was awake despite the late hour, curled on the couch with Louise, who'd been babysitting. He launched at Victoria the moment she appeared, chattering about his day with the unself-conscious joy of children who hadn't learned to hide their feelings. Beck watched them together, Finn showing Victoria a new drawing, her examining it with genuine interest, and felt something shift. This was real. Not performance or experiment, but actual family forming from choice and time. Victoria fit here better than she fit surrounded by tech billionaires and board members. Beck fit here with her finally learning that accepting help wasn't weakness, but the foundation of partnership. After Louise left and Finn finally succumbed to sleep, Beck and Victoria lay tangled on the couch in comfortable silence. Her fingers traced lazy patterns on his chest while he played with her hair. What are you thinking about? How a year ago I was drowning and convinced I'd drown alone. Now I have you, and I don't know how I got this lucky. Victoria propped herself up, looking down at him with expression somewhere between exasperated and fond. Beck Morrison, you let me in. That's all it took, being brave enough to accept help and see where it led. Where did it lead? Here, to us, to family and partnership and whatever comes next. They fell asleep like that, cramped together on a couch too small for two adults, more content than either had been in separate luxury. Morning arrived with Finn bouncing on them, demanding breakfast and attention in equal measure. Months became a year, their relationship developing through accumulated ordinary moments. Victoria teaching Finn to swim in her pool, Beck fixing broken things in her house that expensive contractors had abandoned, family dinners that happened wherever they ended up that night. Beck started law school through a part-time program, Victoria covering tuition with the casual generosity of someone for whom money was never the obstacle. You don't have to do this. Do what pay for education that'll benefit your career and by extension, Finn's future. That seems like solid investment strategy. I'll pay you back. I know, you've been making payments on your mother's bills for 8 months. At this rate, you'll be paid up by Finn's high school graduation. Beck had been chipping away at debt with whatever he could spare that after expenses, small victories against an overwhelming total. Victoria never mentioned it, never tracked what he owed, treated the whole arrangement with casual indifference that made it bearable. Law school consumed Beck's evenings, transforming their routine into something more complicated. Victoria would show up at his apartment after her workday and would help Finn with homework, while Beck studied the three of them navigating domestic chaos that felt more real than any structure they'd formally built. 2 years accumulated like this, Victoria and Beck learning each other's flaws and choosing to stay anyway, Finn growing from 8 to 10 more evidence that family wasn't about blood, but about who showed up consistently through ordinary days. Beck passed bar exam on his second attempt, the failure and redemption teaching him that perfection wasn't required for success. His graduation arrived in October with autumn rain and Finn in the audience wearing a suit that Victoria had bought over Beck's objections. She sat in the front row, pride evident on her face as Beck walked across the stage to collect a degree that represented 3 years of night classes and exhaustion. Afterward, they celebrated at the same pizza place where they'd marked Finn's 8th birthday, the circle of their life together, feeling complete. 3 years. You've been here 3 years. Victoria smiled, sauce on her chin. Worst bet I ever made. Best bet I ever won. Finn interrupted with demands for more quarters for arcade games, and they obliged, watching him race digital cars with the particular contentment of people who'd built something worth keeping. Beck pulled Victoria close, her body fitting against his with familiar comfort. I'm going to marry you someday. The statement emerged without planning, surprising them both. Victoria turned to look at him, searching for doubt or uncertainty. Is that a proposal? Not yet. I need to do it properly with a ring and planning. But I wanted you to know this is permanent for me, you and Finn, and whatever life we're building. I'm in. Her eyes went wet, voice catching. I'm in too. Have been since that horrible dinner where I tried to manipulate you with my tragic backstory. It worked though, because you're a sucker for sad rich girls. They kissed, ignoring Finn's theatrical groaning about adult grossness. Around them, the pizza place hummed with other families, other lives being lived in ordinary moments that accumulated into something meaningful. Beck had started with nothing except debt and a dying son. 3 years later, he had Victoria Finn's health, a law degree, and the particular wealth that came from being loved completely. Later that night, after Finn crashed from sugar and excitement, Beck and Victoria sat on the fire escape watching Portland lights blur through rain. She leaned against him, his arm around her shoulders, both of them comfortable with silence. What are you thinking about? How 3 years ago I was drowning and convinced I'd drown alone. Now I have you, and I don't know how I got this lucky. Victoria kissed his jaw, gentle and grounding. You let me in. That's all it took, being brave enough to accept help and see where it led. Where did it lead? Here, to us, to family and partnership and whatever comes next. Beck held her tighter, feeling grateful for everything that had brought them to this moment. The surgery that saved Finn, the dinner that changed everything, the 3 years of choosing each other through difficulty and doubt. They'd built something real from impossible circumstances, love that transcended practical obstacles through sheer determination to stay. Tomorrow, Beck would start his new job at Legal Aid Services, finally using his degree to help people drowning the way he'd been drowning. Victoria would continue running her company, navigating boardrooms and hostile colleagues. Finn would keep growing, his repaired heart strong enough for whatever life brought. And they'd all come home to each other, family formed not from expectation, but from choice. 3 years had passed. Beck suspected it would become 50 if they kept choosing each other. Victoria seemed to suspect the same, her hand finding his fingers lacing together against the Portland cold. They stayed like that until rain drove them inside and already planning tomorrow, already building the future one ordinary moment at a time. Beck's first day at Portland Legal Aid Services arrived with November rain and the particular anxiety of someone starting over at 37. The office occupied a converted warehouse in southeast Portland, all exposed brick and secondhand furniture, populated by attorneys who'd chosen meaning over money. His desk was smaller than the bathroom in Victoria's house, The computer older than Finn, the coffee situation tragic enough to require bringing supplies from home. The work consumed him immediately. Tenants facing eviction, immigrants, navigating deportation proceedings, people drowning in debt who needed someone to explain that bankruptcy wasn't moral failure, but legal strategy. Beck recognized his former self in every client, saw his own desperation reflected in faces that had learned to expect disappointment from systems designed to protect people with resources. Victoria asked about his day over dinner at her place, Finn absorbed in homework at the kitchen island. How was it? Overwhelming. Good overwhelming. I helped a woman keep her apartment today. The landlord was trying an illegal eviction. She cried when I explained her rights. That must feel incredible. It feels like I'm finally doing something that matters instead of just surviving. She reached across the table, capturing his hand. You've always mattered. Now you're just helping other people that see their own value. Finn interrupted with a question about fractions, and they shifted into homework help mode. Beck explaining denominators while Victoria provided moral support, despite admitting math beyond basic arithmetic confused her. The domestic routine had become their normal, splitting time between Beck's cramped apartment and Victoria's house, Finn's belongings scattered across both locations, all of them learning to navigate the logistics of lives merging without formal structure. The job offers had arrived a week before Beck started at Legal Aid. Morrison and Cole wanted him for their corporate division estate planning for wealthy clients, six-figure salary, partnership track within 5 years. The money would have solved every lingering financial stress, provided security he'd never imagined possible. Beck had held the offer letter, feeling the weight of practical sense warring with purpose. You should take it. The corporate job. Victoria's voice had been carefully neutral, not influencing but supporting whatever he decided. They'd been standing in her kitchen, Finn asleep upstairs, the offer letter between them like a test neither wanted to fail. It's more money than I've ever dreamed of making. It's also soul-crushing work you'll hate within 6 months. But it's stable, secure. I could pay you back everything I owe in 2 years instead of 10. Victoria had moved closer, taking the letter from his hands and setting it aside. I don't need you to pay me back faster. I need you to be happy. And you won't be happy writing wills for millionaires who are terrified their children will spend their inheritance unwisely. Legal Aid pays $52,000. That's barely more than I made bartending 3 jobs. And you'll go home every night knowing you helped someone instead of protected someone's 3rd vacation home from estate taxes. Beck, do the work that matters. We're financially stable. You don't have to choose money anymore. The permission had felt like oxygen after years of holding his breath. Beck took the legal aid position, watching Victoria's face light with genuine pride when he told her, understanding that she'd been hoping he'd choose purpose over practicality because it meant he was finally believing they'd be okay. 6 months into the job, Beck's supervisor pulled him aside with news that felt simultaneously validating and terrifying. We're recommending you for the senior attorney position. It comes with a raise, $68,000 plus better benefits. You've earned it. That night, Beck came home to find Victoria and Finn making dinner, the kitchen filled with smoke from whatever they were burning. Finn spotted him first, launching himself at Beck with the enthusiastic physicality of 10-year-olds who hadn't learned to moderate affection. Dad, we're making stir-fry. It's kind of on fire, but Tori says that's normal. It's absolutely not normal. Victoria emerged from the smoke wielding a spatula like a weapon. The recipe said high heat. I interpreted that liberally. They ordered pizza instead, laughing over the charred remains of dinner, while Finn narrated his day with the comprehensive detail of children who process life by explaining it. After he went to bed, Beck and Victoria collapsed on her couch, exhaustion and contentment mixing. I got promoted today. Victoria's face transformed with pride. Beck, that's incredible. Tell me everything. Senior attorney position, more responsibility, better pay. Still barely above poverty line by your standards, but it feels like progress. It is progress. You're building something meaningful. Beck pulled her closer, breathing in the scent of her shampoo and burnt vegetables. I keep waiting for you to get tired of this. Of me making a fraction of what I could of splitting time between your mansion and my apartment that's falling apart. But you just keep staying. Because I love you. Because watching you choose purpose over money makes me fall in love with you more. Because you're teaching Finn that success isn't about accumulation, it's about impact. The words settled something in Beck's chest, the last lingering doubt about whether he was enough. Victoria chose him repeatedly through every decision that made practical sense to question. She stayed through his poverty, his pride, his tendency to sabotage when scared. That was worth more than any salary. Spring arrived with Portland's particular brand of unreliable sunshine, everything blooming, then freezing the city unable to commit to a season. Finn had just turned 11 2 months ago, and Beck found himself planning something bigger than their usual pizza tradition for the upcoming family celebration. Victoria had suggested hosting at her house, inviting Finn's entire class, plus the neighborhood kids who'd become his friends through years of playground proximity. You don't have to do that. I want to. Finn deserves a real party, not just scrambling for quarters at an arcade. The party happened on a Saturday with unexpected sun. Victoria's backyard transformed into childhood chaos. 40 kids ran screaming through sprinklers and bounced on the trampoline Beck had considered excessive, until watching Finn's face light with pure joy. Parents clustered with drinks, eyeing Victoria's house with the particular discomfort of people confronting wealth they'd never access. Wyatt appeared at Beck's elbow, beer in hand, despite the daytime hour. "This is surreal. Your girlfriend casually throwing a party that probably cost more than my monthly salary." She wanted Finn to have something special. He's got special. Kid's got a woman who loves him like he's hers, a dad who went to law school while working full-time, friends who don't care that he was sick for half his life. That's pretty goddamn special. Beck watched Finn cannonball into the pool surrounded by kids shrieking with laughter. His son had gone from dying to thriving, from exhausted to inexhaustible, the surgery years past transforming everything. Victoria stood near the pool's edge, supervising with the careful attention of someone aware that kids plus water required vigilance. "I'm going to marry her." Wyatt nearly choked on his beer. "When? Soon. I've been saving for a ring. Nothing like what she could buy herself, but something that matters because I chose it." "About damn time. You've been together, what, 3.5 years? Long enough to be sure." The party wound down with cake and presents, Finn holding court among his friends, with the particular satisfaction of children whose birthday wishes exceed expectations. After everyone left and Finn crashed from sugar and excitement, Beck helped Victoria clean up both of them, moving through her kitchen with practiced coordination. "Thank you for today, for making it special." Victoria loaded the dishwasher wrong and Beck gently rearranged plates. "He's a great kid. He deserves great things." "So do you." She turned to face him, soap suds on her hands. "I have great things. I have you and Finn and this weird life we've built. That's more than most people get." Beck kissed her tasting birthday cake and promise. "What if we made it official?" "What are you asking?" "Nothing yet, just thinking out loud about futures." Her expression shifted to something hopeful and cautious. "I'd like a future with you, official or otherwise." They finished cleaning in comfortable silence, the kind that had developed from years of learning each other's rhythms. Later, they lay in her bed, tangled together, Beck's mind spinning through proposal logistics. He'd been saving it for months, setting aside whatever remained after bills and debt payments, accumulating a fund that felt simultaneously meaningful and inadequate. The next week, Beck visited jewelry stores during lunch breaks, feeling increasingly out of his depth. The rings Victoria would be accustomed to started at 50,000 stones, larger than anything he could imagine affording. The rings he could afford looked apologetic by comparison, small diamonds in simple settings that announced their budget origins. A jeweler in Selwood listened to Beck's dilemma with the patience of someone accustomed to economically anxious customers. "What's your budget?" 3,000, maybe 3,200 if I skip groceries for a month. "And you're worried it won't be enough?" She's a billionaire. She could buy herself the Hope Diamond without thinking about it. The jeweler, a woman in her 60s with kind eyes, pulled out several options. "Here's what I know about expensive rings. They're about the giver's wealth, not the recipient's feelings. Your fiancé wants something you chose that represents your commitment. She doesn't need a big diamond to prove you love her. They designed something together, a simple platinum band with a modest diamond, elegant in its restraint, unmistakably chosen with care rather than budget. $3,200 every penny Beck had saved over 6 months. The jeweler promised it would be ready in 2 weeks. Beck planned the proposal with the obsessive detail of someone aware he'd only get one chance. Castagna, the restaurant where they'd had their first dinner, the place where the evening had turned into something neither expected. He called ahead, arranging a private table, explaining the significance with embarrassing earnestness that made the hostess's voice go soft with vicarious romance. Finn was his co-conspirator, sworn to secrecy with the seriousness of children entrusted with adult matters. "You're really going to ask her to marry you? If she says yes." "She'll say yes, she loves you." "How do you know?" Finn's expression suggested Beck was being deliberately dense. "Because she looks at you the way you looked at Mom in the pictures. Like you're the best thing that ever happened." The observation hit harder than expected, Grace's memory surfacing after years of existing in comfortable past tense. Beck still loved his late wife, probably always would, but Victoria had proven that hearts could expand rather than replace. Finn seemed to understand this, instinctively accepting Victoria's place in their lives without feeling disloyal to the mother he barely remembered. The proposal date arrived in late June with Portland sunshine that felt like blessing. Beck told Victoria they were celebrating his promotion, dodging questions about why Castagna required reservations weeks in advance. Finn went to Wyatt's house with instructions to text updates on Operation Proposal, a name he'd insisted on despite Beck's protests. Victoria appeared at Beck's apartment dressed simply, unaware of the evening's actual purpose. She'd grown comfortable enough to keep casual clothes at his place, the expensive labels mixed with his thrift store finds, in ways that amused them both. Tonight she wore jeans and a silk blouse, effortless in the way only people completely secure in themselves managed. "You look nervous." "Just excited about the promotion." "Beck, you've been promoted for 2 months. Try again." "Can a man take his girlfriend to a nice dinner without interrogation?" She let it go, trusting him with whatever surprise he was planning. The drive to Castagna filled with comfortable conversation, Victoria talking about a board meeting where difficult questions had been raised about company direction, Beck half listening while managing his own anxiety. The restaurant looked exactly as it had nearly 4 years ago, the converted house intimate and expensive. The hostess recognized Beck from his planning calls, leading them to the same private dining room where they'd navigated that first awkward meal. Victoria's expression shifted as she recognized the significance. "This is where we had our first dinner. Seemed appropriate for what I wanted to ask you." Understanding dawned slowly, her face cycling through realization and hope and fear in rapid succession. Beck reached across the table, taking her hand before nerves could derail him completely. "Almost 4 years ago, you walked into my bar and offered me a bet I was too proud to refuse. You thought I wouldn't last 5 minutes in your world. I thought you'd get bored with mine. We were both wrong in the best possible way." His voice caught emotion, threatening to overwhelm a careful planning. Victoria's eyes were already wet, her grip on his hand tightening. "You saved Finn's life. You taught me that accepting help isn't weakness. You stayed through every moment I tried to push you away, proving over and over that you weren't going anywhere. You made me believe that love doesn't have to end in loss." Beck pulled the ring box from his jacket, hands shaking as he opened it. The diamond caught candlelight, modest and perfect. "Victoria Sterling, will you marry me? Not because of money or convenience or any practical reason. Because I love you more than I've loved anything. Because Finn loves you. Because we're family already and I want to make it official." Tears streamed down her face, voice thick when she finally spoke. "Yes, obviously yes. You ridiculous, wonderful man who thinks I care about ring size." He slid the band onto her finger. It fit perfectly, the jeweler's sizing accurate. Victoria held up her hand, examining the ring with expression somewhere between adoration and amusement. "This is perfect. I don't want a bigger diamond. I want this one, the one you chose that represents 6 months of you saving and planning. It's not what you're used to." "Stop. It's exactly what I want because it's from you." They ordered food neither would remember eating, too focused on each other and the future they were committing to. Victoria asked about his planning, laughing at Finn's involvement in Beck's obsessive reservation strategy. The evening accumulated into memory, one of those nights that would mark time before engagement, after engagement, everything different and exactly the same. Later, back at Victoria's house, with Finn asleep after being retrieved from Wyatt's, they stood in her bedroom processing the night's significance. The ring caught light whenever Victoria moved, drawing her attention with the fascination of something new and meaningful. We should set a date. Beck pulled her close, exhaustion and joy mixing. You probably want something big. Society wedding, hundreds of guests, event planners managing every detail. I want something small, just people who matter. Maybe at that park where we took Finn after his surgery, the one with the oak trees. You want to get married in a public park? I want to get married somewhere that means something. That park is where we became family. Seems appropriate to make it official there. They planned through the night, excitement overriding sleep. Small wedding, 40 guests, maximum, Finn as best man because the alternatives felt wrong. 6 months for planning, allowing Victoria to extract herself from board commitments and Beck to coordinate time off work. Spring wedding, assuming Portland's weather cooperated with backup plans for rain that was statistically inevitable. The engagement became public through Victoria's board obligations announcement, appearing in business publications with photos that made Beck wince at his own awkwardness. Reactions split predictably. People who knew them offering genuine congratulations. Strangers online questioning what a billionaire saw in a legal aid attorney who looked uncomfortable in formal wear. The months before the wedding passed in logistical chaos. Victoria managing board obligations while planning a ceremony, Beck navigating increased responsibility at work while preparing for permanent family structure, Finn processing the transition with surprising maturity. They decided to keep Beck's apartment, temporarily unwilling to force Finn into full-time mansion living, creating flexibility that honored their different comfort zones. Ellen attended a tasting for the wedding menu during one of her increasingly rare lucid periods, offering opinions on salmon versus chicken with the authority of someone who remembered working catering decades ago. Watching her engage normally reminded Beck of how much dementia had stolen and how precious these moments of clarity were. Your father would have liked Victoria. Ellen's observation came quietly directed at Beck while Victoria was occupied with the caterer. He would have thought she was too good for you, but he would have liked her. That's brutally honest. Your father was a coward who ran when things got hard. Victoria stays. That makes her better than both of us deserved. The lucidity faded before Beck could respond, Ellen retreating into confusion that left her calling him by his father's name. Victoria returned to find Beck comforting his mother through disorientation, her hand finding his shoulder in silent support. The wedding day arrived in April with unprecedented sunshine, Portland offering the rare gift of perfect weather. Beck woke in his apartment with Finn already dressed in the suit they'd picked together, his son's excitement palpable. Wyatt arrived early, designated groomsman and moral support, bearing coffee and breakfast sandwiches they ate while managing pre-ceremony anxiety. You ready for this? Beck adjusted his tie, the fourth attempt to get it right. I've been ready for years, just want to get through the ceremony without crying in front of everyone. You're going to cry. Victoria's going to cry. Finn's going to cry. All right. I'm probably going to cry. Accept it now. They drove to Laurelhurst Park, the oak grove where Beck and Victoria had taken Finn after his surgery, marking the beginning of them as family. 40 chairs arranged in careful rows, decorated with simple flowers that cost less than Victoria could have spent, but felt more meaningful for their restraint. Guests arrived gradually, Wyatt's family, Louise and neighbors from Beck's building, Maggie and a few Sterling Technologies executives, who'd become genuine friends, Dr. Hendricks, who'd saved Finn's life. Beck stood at the front with Finn beside him, both of them in matching gray suits, father and son united in nervous anticipation. Finn kept adjusting his tie the way Beck had, mirroring mannerisms he'd absorbed through years of proximity. The kid looked older than 11, something in his expression suggesting awareness of this moment's significance beyond simple ceremony. Music started, acoustic guitar playing, something Beck didn't recognize, but Victoria had chosen. The guests stood, turning toward where she appeared at the grove's edge. Victoria wore something simple and white that probably cost more than Beck's first car, but looked perfect against spring greenery. She walked alone, having declined the traditional father-daughter march, approaching Beck and Finn with expressions somewhere between joy and terror. The officiant, a judge friend of Victoria's, cleared his throat to begin. Finn interrupted before any formal words could be spoken, stepping forward with the confidence of children who hadn't learned to doubt themselves. Wait, I have something to say. The judge yielded with practiced grace. Finn pulled out a folded paper, hands shaking slightly as he unfolded it. I wrote this last night. Dad doesn't know about it. Beck's throat closed, emotion already overwhelming him. Finn's voice was surprisingly steady as he read, 4 years ago, I was really sick. My heart didn't work right, and I was scared all the time. Dad was scared too, but he pretended not to be because that's what dads do. Then Tori came and she was scared with us instead of pretending. That's when I knew she was different. The paper rustled as Finn adjusted his grip. Most adults lie to kids because they think it's protecting us. But Dad and Tori don't lie. When I asked if I might die, Dad said maybe, but we'd fight as hard as we could. When I asked Tori if she was staying, she said she wanted to but couldn't promise because life is complicated. They told me truth even when it was scary, and that made me trust them. Victoria's face was already wet with tears. Beck stood frozen watching his son deliver wisdom that surpassed his years. Finn continued, voice growing stronger. Today, they're getting married for real. Not because they have to, but because they want to. Because we're already family, and this makes it official. So I want to ask them questions like the officiant does, but mine are more important. He turned to Beck first. Dad, do you promise to keep making Tori laugh even when she forgets how? Beck's voice came out rough. I do. Do you promise to hold her hand when she's scared and never let her feel alone? I do, always. Finn shifted to Victoria, his expression softening. Tori, do you promise to keep reading bedtime stories even when you're tired? I do. Do you promise to be patient when Dad burns pancakes? Laughter rippled through guests, breaking tension. Victoria nodded through tears. I do. Finn's voice dropped, becoming smaller. And do you promise to be my mom? Not to replace my first mom, but to be my other mom. The one who's here. The one who holds my hand and tells me everything's okay. Victoria dropped to her knees, pulling Finn into a hug that was equal parts desperation and love. Her voice was barely audible. Yes, I promise, I promise, I promise, Ikanos. The embrace lasted until the judge gently reminded them there was technically more ceremony to complete. They pulled apart, both wiping faces, Finn looking pleased with his disruption. The official vows happened in a blur of traditional words that felt less meaningful than Finn's impromptu additions. Beck slid a matching platinum band onto Victoria's finger, choosing identical simplicity to mirror her engagement ring. She placed a ring on his hand, the first jewelry he'd worn since Grace's death, the weight unfamiliar and grounding. The judge pronounced them married, and Beck kissed Victoria with the accumulated want of nearly 4 years of building toward this moment. Guests applauded the sound, mixing with birdsong and Portland traffic. Finn inserted himself between them, forcing a group hug that felt more complete than any couple's moment could have been. They'd started as man and child, added Victoria, and formalized into family through accumulated choices that led to this afternoon. The reception happened at a restaurant near the park, intimate dinner for 40 that balanced Victoria's desire for elegance with Beck's comfort limitations. Speeches happened. Wyatt telling embarrassing stories about Beck's early law school struggles. Maggie revealing Victoria's initial terror of becoming involved with someone from completely different circumstances. Finn monopolizing attention by narrating his view of his parents' relationship with hilarious honesty. Ellen appeared during dessert, having been brought from her facility with careful supervision. Her moments of clarity had become increasingly rare, but tonight she seemed present, watching Beck and Victoria with expressions suggesting she understood significance. She gestured Beck closer, her voice weak but determined. I've had 3 children. I know the signs. Beck followed her gaze to Victoria, seeing nothing obvious. Signs of what? Pregnancy. She's careful not to drink, keeps touching her stomach unconsciously. 3 months if I'm guessing. The observation landed like revelation, Beck reviewing recent weeks through new lens. Victoria's increased fatigue, her aversion to certain foods, the way she'd declined wine at dinner last week without explanation. They'd been careful about birth control, but not obsessive, both of them comfortable with the idea of children eventually. Ellen squeezed his hand, lucidity already fading. Take care of my boys, all 3 of them. Later, after guests dispersed and Finn had been collected by Louise for the night, Beck and Victoria retreated to her house as a married couple. The legal status felt simultaneously meaningless and transformative. They'd been family for years, but official recognition carried unexpected weight. Victoria emerged from the bathroom in sleep clothes, climbing into bed beside Beck with exhausted contentment. He pulled her close, hand settling on her stomach with new awareness. My mother thinks you're pregnant. She went still. What? At the reception, she said she recognized signs. Is she right? Victoria was quiet long enough to make Beck's heart race with possibility and fear. When she spoke, her voice carried careful hope. I took a test yesterday. Didn't want to tell you before the wedding in case it changed how you felt about everything. Changed how? Victoria, are you pregnant? About 3 months. I was going to tell you tonight after the wedding. Surprise. Beck couldn't process the information, too many emotions flooding simultaneously. Joy, terror, wonder, anxiety about finances and logistics and whether they were ready for a baby when they just formalized their relationship. We're having a baby. If you're okay with that, I know we didn't plan this and timing isn't ideal with your new quote, and he kissed her, cutting off the anxious rambling. I'm more than okay. I'm terrified and excited and completely unprepared. But I'm okay. They lay tangled together, processing the dual revelations of marriage and impending parenthood. Finn would be nearly 12 by the time the baby arrived, old enough to help, young enough to feel displaced. They'd need to navigate his feelings carefully, ensure he understood the addition didn't diminish his importance. Should we tell Finn tomorrow? Victoria's hand found his on her stomach. Let's wait until second trimester. Make sure everything's progressing normally before we get his hopes up. Sleep came eventually, both of them overwhelmed by day's events and future's implications. Beck drifted off, remembering the vows Finn had written, the promises they'd made to each other and to the child who'd brought them together. Family wasn't about biology or legal documents. It was about choosing each other repeatedly through accumulated ordinary moments. The next year passed in controlled chaos, Victoria navigating pregnancy while managing her company, Beck adjusting to the reality that his family was expanding, Finn processing the news of an incoming sibling with maturity that occasionally cracked into age-appropriate anxiety. They told him at 16 weeks after ultrasound confirmed healthy development, watching his face cycle through surprise and excitement and fear. Will you still have time for me when the baby comes? Beck pulled him close, recognizing the question's deeper fear. Always. You're my son, my first priority. That doesn't change because we're adding to our family. But babies need lots of attention. Victoria settled beside them on the couch, her growing belly visible beneath the loose clothes. You're right, they do. Which is why we need you to help us remember we're not just parents to a baby, but parents to you too. You're the expert on this family. We need your wisdom. The reassurance seemed to ease something in Finn, though his anxiety surfaced periodically through the pregnancy. They navigated it together, Victoria and Beck, learning to balance their excitement with Finn's need for stability, ensuring their first child didn't feel replaced by the novelty of a baby. The pregnancy progressed normally, Victoria working until 36 weeks before finally conceding to reduced hours. Beck had been promoted again at legal aid, now managing junior attorneys and earning $78,000 annually, still modest by Victoria's standards, but enough that he no longer felt like he was drowning financially. They'd moved into her house full-time once Victoria hit third trimester, Beck finally accepting that raising a newborn in his apartment was impractical, regardless of his comfort with wealth. Their daughter arrived in January, 2 weeks early, but healthy, screaming her arrival with impressive volume. Beck held her in the delivery room, this tiny person who looked nothing like Finn had at birth, overcome with gratitude that Victoria had survived what Grace hadn't. Victoria watched him with exhausted joy, understanding his fear without needing explanation. Finn met his sister at the hospital, approaching with careful reverence. She's really small. You were smaller. You fit in my hand. Can I hold her? They arranged Finn in a chair, placed his sister carefully in his arms, watching him examine her with fascinated intensity. What's her name? Beck and Victoria exchanged glances, having debated this for months without resolution. Victoria spoke first. We were thinking Lily, after your dad's mom's middle name. But we wanted your input. Lily Morrison Sterling. Finn tested the name, then nodded approval. That's good. Strong. She's going to need a strong name because being our family is complicated. The truth of it hit Beck. Their family was complicated, blended from loss and necessity and choice. But complexity didn't mean broken. It meant real, messy, beautiful in ways that straightforward families never achieved. 6 months after Lily's birth, Beck woke to the sound of his daughter crying from the nursery and his wife moving to comfort her. The automatic thought surprised him, my wife. After a year of marriage, the label had finally settled into comfortable truth. He found Victoria in the nursery, Lily at her breast, moonlight filtering through windows that framed Portland's skyline. Go back to sleep. I've got her. Beck settled into the chair beside the glider where Victoria fed their daughter. Can't sleep. Too much thinking. About about how 5 years ago I was drowning in debt with a dying son, convinced I'd never have anything except survival. Now I have you and Finn and Lily and a job that matters. I keep waiting to wake up and discover it was all some desperate fantasy. Victoria shifted Lily to her shoulder, burping her with practiced efficiency. It's real. We're real. Everything that got us here, the surgery, the dinner, all the times you tried to push me away, and I refused to leave. That's what built this. Lily settled back into sleep, full and content. Victoria returned her to the crib, both parents standing over her, watching tiny movements, the particular vigilance of people who'd learned that health wasn't guaranteed. Beck's arms circled Victoria's waist, pulling her close. Thank you. For what? For staying when I gave you every reason to leave. For loving Finn like he's yours. For giving us Lily. For making me believe that happy endings exist outside fairy tales. Victoria turned in his arms, pressing close. You gave me all those things too. Purpose, family, love that doesn't come with conditions. We saved each other, Beck. That's how this works. They returned to bed, both knowing Lily would wake again in 2 hours, demanding another feeding. Finn slept across the hall, his room decorated with dinosaur posters and the accumulated evidence of a childhood that had nearly been stolen but had been saved through money and luck, and Victoria's decision to walk into a bar one night. Morning arrived with Lily's cries at 6, Finn appearing shortly after with his hair standing in all directions. Beck made breakfast while Victoria fed the baby, all of them navigating the routine they developed through months of practice. Finn chatted about school. Victoria answered emails one-handed. Beck burned toast and accepted the teasing that followed. This was his life now. No longer survival mode, but actual living days accumulated from ordinary moments that felt miraculous because he'd nearly lost all of it. Finn had just turned 12 last month, healthy and strong, his repaired heart pumping efficiently through a childhood they'd reclaimed from medical crisis. Victoria would return to work next week, balancing CEO responsibilities with motherhood in ways that were imperfect and real. Lily would grow oblivious to the circumstances of her conception or the complexity of her family structure, loved completely by everyone in her orbit. Beck's phone buzzed with a work email, a client needing urgent help with an eviction notice. He responded quickly, then set the device aside to focus on breakfast chaos. The work would always be there, endless need that he could meet imperfectly but meaningfully. His family was here now, demanding attention, deserving presence. After breakfast, they prepared for a park trip, the four of them loading into Victoria's car with the amount of gear required for a baby. Finn chatted in the back seat about dinosaur facts he'd learned. Lily dozed in her car seat. Victoria drove while Beck navigated. They looked like any other family heading for Saturday recreation, unremarkable, except for the wealth that funded their stability and the history that had forged their bonds. At the park, Beck watched Finn push Lily in a baby swing, while Victoria supervised all of them, captured in afternoon light that turned ordinary moments golden. This was what he'd fought for when Finn was dying, not just survival, but the chance at normal life, childhood filled with playground visits and sibling relationships and parents who stayed. Victoria caught his eye across the playground, smiling with complete contentment. Beck smiled back, feeling gratitude so intense it hurt. 5 years ago, she'd walked into his bar offering a bet neither understood. Turned out losing that bet was the best thing that ever happened to any of them. They stayed at the park until Lily grew fussy and Finn had exhausted the climbing structures. The drive home was quiet, both kids drowsing Victoria's hand, finding Beck's across the center console. They'd go home, navigate evening routine, probably fall asleep during whatever movie they attempted. Tomorrow would bring more of the same work in childcare and the endless logistics of family life. And Beck couldn't wait.